This is the Blood Red Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
It's the Blood Red Podcast, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo. I'm Guy Clarke. Welcome along. A champion's performance put on for the returning crowd at Anfield. Liverpool's Gini provides another magical display, and the kids prepare for a midweek field trip. All to come here on the Blood Red Podcast as we review the win over Wolves, as well as take a glance at Wednesday's Champions League action with Midtjylland. Alongside me to talk through all of that, our Liverpool correspondent Paul Gorst, Dan Kay and Matt Addison. Hope you're all well, gentlemen. I'll come to you first off, Gorsty, and inside Anfield on Sunday, and had 2,000 friends with you.
Well, I don't know about friends, but certainly like-minded folks, shall we say. It was really, really good. Just makes so much of a difference. I mean, I'm reluctant to complain, but covering some of these games over the last few months, particularly when they haven't had much riding on them, I'm thinking of towards the back end of last season with games against Burnley and Aston Villa, and even this season, the Carabao Cup game against Arsenal was particularly sluggish, and the one against Midtjylland, and a lot of it just owed so much to the fact that there were no fans there, and it was just football purely for the sake of it. But this was, as soon as You Can Never Walk Alone came on, it was you just got a sense that this is going to be something special. And even when they came out to warm up, actually, first when the goalkeepers came, and then when the rest of the team came, the crowd really reacted to them. And I think Jurgen Klopp mentioned it in his post-match press conference, saying kind of what that meant to the team, and it was just a special moment and a night that whoever was there won't forget in a hurry. I know there was only 2,000 there, fortunate enough to be there. Sean Bradbury from our camp was there, wasn't he? And Dan Morgan as well of Liverpool.com. And I haven't spoken to either of them yet, but I'd imagine that they both enjoyed their night. And it was just great to have fans back. And the COP were asking for the champions, and the players showed them, why they are that. Because it was, I just thought it kind of had a little bit of a similar feel to Leicester last season, and that it was a tricky game, a little bit of a worry with injuries and fatigue, and some kind of trepidation in the game. And Liverpool just put all that to the side and turned in one of the best performances of the season.
Yeah, not the first time at Anfield this season, of course, that they've hit for or put on a brilliant display. But it seemed timely, Dan, and as Gorsty said there, of course, it was only 2,000. What did you make of it? Because I know beforehand, sort of, you were caught in two minds as to what it was going to be like, only 2,000 fans at Anfield.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a season ticket for many years. I was eligible to apply through the ballot for a ticket for last night. And I didn't, for a number of reasons. One of them to do with the timing and being on an early shift today. Also knowing that the way it works quite fairly is if you get one, you're basically out of the equation until everybody's had a go. But to be honest, part of it was the thought of sitting in a still virtually empty ground didn't, on a cold Sunday night in December, didn't feel massively appealing. Obviously, I've heard from Gorsty and Doyley and, all our reporters that, a lot of these matches behind closed doors have been fairly dispiriting experiences. But, I woke up yesterday morning with a bit of a pang thinking, the match, where am I going? And, I have to be honest, I found it quite emotional watching from home. I don't think I'm the only person to feel that way from having spoken to friends and seeing stuff on social media. Like Gorty said, even before kick, once the first few pictures started dropping through of fans going through the turnstiles and singing on the Kop, and I thought even the way they did it on the Kop, the way things were distanced, it was only 1,500 on a 15,000 odd terrace. But the way everything was spaced out, if you look at a picture of the Kop as a whole, it looked good. It didn't look like they were all just put in one corner. They were spread out, and it gave that kind of sense of fans being there. And, the 2,000s, 500 odd in the main stand, absolutely did themselves and everybody proud, because you could hear them loud and clear, belting all kinds of songs, not just the new ones, but plenty of ones for the old timers as well. Loud and clear, excuse me, over the TV. And Jurgen Klopp and the players were very clear afterwards, weren't they, that, it made an enormous difference to them as well. You could tell they were really lifted by it, the whole experience. And that bore out in the performance, which, as Gorty said, was as fine a showing as I think we've seen from Liverpool this season against, a decent team, all right, missing Jimenez up front. But like Leicester, we made them look very ordinary.
What do you make of it, Matt? I know you were in the ballot and unfortunately unsuccessful, but seeing sort of the fans return, I suppose it's sort of hoping that you can get back there yourself before too long.
Yeah, exactly that. It made a huge difference, didn't it? I think we've written a story, it might have even been yours down this morning, that I think Leander Dendoncker from Wolves suggested that even though there was only 2,000 within the stadium, it felt like 15,000. And you can completely understand where he's coming from because, you know, as Dan says there, the way that they'd done it on the carpet, it looked a lot more people. It certainly heard like a lot more, sounded like a lot more people than what it was. And it was just great to see, obviously, Jurgen Klopp's fist pumps at the end, that sort of thing. How long have we waited to see things like that? It's all of these little details that you'd almost forgotten, you know, going into the match. You were thinking, oh, it's great that there's fans back, but you weren't necessarily thinking, oh, it's great that there's fans back because we'll have this, we'll have that. And it's just all of those different little elements of that match day experience that you started to get back. And yeah, I mean, I was watching it on Amazon Prime from my lounge, and it was just, it just felt, you know, it felt like a proper football match for the first time in 9 months, didn't it? You didn't have the artificial crowd noise. You didn't have all that sort of nonsense of being empty seats and all of that sort of thing. Of course, there were still the vast majority of them empty, but as I say, it just felt a lot bigger of an occasion than what it might have done. And I was similar to Dan. I was dubious to sort of see how much of a difference it would make. But having watched Chelsea a couple of days ago and then obviously Liverpool now, Anfield as well, you can tell that it's just made such a huge difference. And I think it made a huge difference to the players as well.
Yeah, let's get on to the performance. And before we get on to just how scintillating and brilliant it was, of course, you were obviously there and saw, and we're talking about the impact of the fans. It was Caoimhi Kelleher's Premier League debut, of course, after playing really well against Ajax in an empty stadium. But thinking specifically about the lob that Daniel Podence tried early on in the game, that was a big save for Kelleher. And it felt, certainly first half, with the fans behind him in the Kop, that it was maybe as good a game as he could have come in for his Premier League debut with the backing of the fans behind him.
Yeah, it was pretty much a perfect night for him, wasn't it? Apart from spelling his name wrong on the back of the kit in the first half. Just once again, similar to Tuesday night, I thought he was just calm and composed, very assured, never did anything too spectacular, but didn't really need to. His kicking was good with both feet, made a couple of good saves, as you say, particularly the chip from Podence, which was quite a cheeky, clever little lob, and he was quite unlucky, really. I thought Kelleher did well to get across and clawed it away. Just a really confident performance at a time when it was really needed, because I think we all know Adrian isn't everyone's favourite, is he, when he comes in, and there's a little bit of uncertainty that kind of sometimes spread amongst the Liverpool defence if he's in goal. And the feeling might have been something similar when you've got a 22-year-old goalkeeper coming in for his Premier League debut and his Champions League debut on Tuesday. And he just kind of dispelled the worries quite comfortably. So onwards and upwards for him. I think he'll probably play on Wednesday only against Midtjylland, and then he's likely to stay in the team for Sunday against Fulham. So big couple of weeks for him, and he, so far so good. He's done really, really well, and he can be very proud of what he's done.
Yeah, and he is, as Gorst said there, Dan, he is 22 now as well. I know goalkeepers obviously do mature a lot later than outfield players, but it does feel now that this is probably the right time for him to start trying to kick on with his senior career, whether it had been at Liverpool or elsewhere. He's sort of been on the fringes and been spoken about. You hear sort of the tales from goalkeeper training of how brilliant he is. And now we've actually, last two games, we've had a chance to actually see that with our own eyes.
Absolutely. I mean, he hasn't put a foot wrong, has he, in either game? You know, as Gorst said, he's been so calm and so composed in everything he does. And, you know, that's so important for a goalkeeper, particularly when you're playing behind, you know, pretty much a makeshift back four, which obviously is what Liverpool's has been and will be for, you know, for the foreseeable, you know, due to the injury list that they've had. But, you know, I think he's really shown a lot of maturity beyond his years. You know, that the whole point about calm, to me, I don't want to get on Adrian's case because, you know, he seems like a decent lad and he helped us win the league and the Super Cup last year. But particularly with a goalkeeper, can take, you know, uncertainty and nerviness can become contagious. And you're looking at that, the Villa game, the 7-2. There's no way Liverpool are losing that game 7-2 if Adrian doesn't make that mistake in the first couple of minutes. And, you know, Ajax the other night, and particularly probably Wolves, who would probably would have had time to prepare for the fact that Kelleher would have been in goal, may well have spoken before the game that they've only got a young kid in goal. Let's throw a few crosses in, see charge him down, see how he reacts to a bit of pressure, and he just looked absolutely nerveless. So he's deserved this opportunity. I spoke to John Aldridge just before for his Echo column, which will be going online later this evening, and obviously he was delighted to see an Irishman back in the Liverpool team. It's been a while since the likes of Robbie Keane and Steve Finnan were around, and he made the point that once Alisson comes back, Caoimhi may well have to be quite patient again, because Alisson's the best goalkeeper in the world, but there's no better place to learn your trade and learn the ropes than under a goalkeeper like Alisson, working for a manager like Jurgen Klopp, and obviously with the elite level backroom staff and goalkeeping coaches he's got around him. And I think it's safe to say he is now in 180 minutes of football really established himself as Liverpool's number 2 goalkeeper, and I'm delighted for the lad.
Yeah, it certainly does seem that way. And as you say, without wanting to make it an Adrian bashing session, that you don't really sort of feel if Alisson now he's going to miss games, if Kelleher's going to come in, there will be a lot of confidence about it. Let's talk about the performance itself then, Matt. And of course, there have been the games with Leicester City, Arsenal in the league as well, where we've waxed lyrical afterwards and said how Liverpool are the best team in the league and how brilliant they've performed. I suppose this is another one of those performances, maybe even the best of the lot so far.
Yeah, I said last night after the game, it was very similar to the Leicester one last season, where the pundits were kind of saying, going into the match, maybe this could be the end of Liverpool's home unbeaten run and that sort of thing. And it just never looked likely to be the case. Wolves started the game quite well. I thought the first sort of 20, 25 minutes, they were okay. But from that point onwards, we used the word dominant on the debrief about 500 times last night. And I think that is the word that sums up this match. I think Liverpool controlled it. Every single player was pretty much on their game. They played really well. I thought in midfield, Liverpool dominated. Gini Wijnaldum, absolutely superb again. Curtis Jones quietly just doing that defensive diligence that he's been able to bring to his game so far this season. You look at the fullbacks, I thought it was obviously a huge boost to have Trent Alexander-Arnold back, but even before that, Nico Williams had done well. Andy Robertson again putting in another shift. He just doesn't seem to ever get tired, does he, of doing that on that left-hand side. And yeah, there were so many positives for Liverpool. It was a performance I really thought that put down a marker, and I know we're going to come on to some of the other title contenders later in the podcast, but for me that was a performance against a really, really good Wolves team with some really, really good players that just, for me, underlined the reason that Liverpool should be Premier League title favourites this season. And I do think they will go on and win it, because to perform as well as that with as many injuries as what they've got, it just underlines the strength and the quality that Jurgen Klopp has got to work with.
And just how sharp, Paul, was Mohamed Salah. We've spent weeks and weeks talking about the form of Roberto Firmino, how brilliant Diogo Jota is, and yet Salah still is the man to find the back of the net for the Reds. Yeah, it wasn't even a massive mistake from Conor Cody, was it? It's just a slight miscontrol, and before you know it, Salah's in and he scored his 11th goal of the season. Just a top striker, isn't he? A top forward. I thought... everywhere you look across that Liverpool team last night, you can find someone who was excellent, and you can't really single out anyone because of how good they were as a team. But Salah and Mane look particularly sharp, and that is important for Liverpool, because they need those two, don't they, at the very best. And Mane was unfortunate not to get his goal. Nelson Semedo taking that off his toe and claiming that as an own goal. But I thought both of those two were excellent, and if one doesn't get you, the other will, and I thought both of them were superb along with everyone else. I thought Wijnaldum was excellent. Robertson again. Both of those two played so much football, but didn't let it show last night. Great to see Alexander-Arnold back in the team, popping up with an assist, pretty much, if it doesn't get it given to him. Just an all-round perfect night. As Klopp said, he said if no one's injured, then this is a perfect night, and it looks as though that is the case. So superb night, and it just kind of keeps them on the toes of Tottenham, doesn't it, with that big game coming up? What is it, in next week, is it? Yeah. Yeah, very, very soon indeed. Dan, we best talk about Conor Coady returning to Anfield. The lad from St Helens. Unfortunately, we've not got Ian Doyle with us to back up his local man. But in terms of Conor Coady, night to forget for him. That error for the first goal, and then, well, the dive. Less said about that, probably the better.
Yeah, it's not a night that young Conor will look back with any particular degree of fondness, I don't think. I mean, he's a good player and a decent lad, and there has been a little bit of talk that, particularly obviously with Liverpool's defensive crisis, that maybe Liverpool might look to make a move and bring him back to Anfield. I think possibly what happened last night possibly kills stone dead any chance of that happening. It was a bit of an embarrassing moment for him, wasn't it? I mean, and for once, VAR actually did its job and didn't stitch Liverpool up, which it seems like it's been doing on a weekly basis recently. It was one of those incidents, was it, where, I mean, I guess it was a dive. He has gone to ground easily, but I've always kind of had this this thing that it can't always be a penalty or a dive. Sometimes it's something in the middle. And whether his momentum took him down or whatever, I've got to be honest, when I first saw it, even on the first replay, I thought that's a pen. And it was only when you looked a bit closer, you realised that Mane had actually kind of brought his foot back a little bit. And it may well be that Coady had already kind of seen the foot coming out and was prepared to go over it. Listen, it's what footballers do. Liverpool footballers do it. All footballers do it. It's part of the game. Whether we like it or not, VAR is there to kind of clamp down on it. And hopefully maybe last night was the first step in VAR getting its act together, because it's thankfully we're 20 minutes into this podcast, and it's the first time we've mentioned VAR, and that feels like an improvement going on recent weeks. It's nice to be talking about football again.
Yeah, Gorsty, did you nearly fall off your chair at Anfield? I know you and VAR have a very spiky relationship.
To be honest, from where I was sitting, when it got given, I could kind of see, that could be viewed as a high foot. But then as soon as you see the replay, I actually wasn't too worried, because it was just so blatantly not. Mane kind of knows it's going to happen and just checks his foot, doesn't he? And then Coady goes over. So I did put my trust in VAR for that one, or the people implementing VAR, shall we say, which is the greater of the two evils.
Yeah, man who's always got his trust in VAR is Matt Addison. Matt, just sort of in terms of the incident, I think Dan's probably right there. Was it a dive, or was it he was sort of anticipating the contact, which of course never came?
Yeah, I think you've thrown me under the bus with that VAR introduction there with the comments section, but we'll brush over that. No, I do think it was a dive. I think there's a fine line, isn't there, between is he anticipating contact and is he throwing himself to the ground? I think he was trying to deceive the referee. I really do. I think, obviously seeing that Mane has put his boot up there, it was a little bit of a risk from Mane, but then, the fact that he sort of throws himself forward, throws himself to his knees without any contact, it doesn't look too good. I was the same as Dan and Gorsty. In real time, you thought, as Mane made a little bit of an error there, has it been a penalty? But then, you watch it back and it's pretty obvious that there's no contact there and there's no reason for Coady to go down. And yeah, I have very much been on the side of VAR being generally a good thing. Not everyone they get right, but certainly that one last night was absolutely spot on.
Just to interject, when I was watching Match of the Day last night, when I got back home, they showed the incident, and then Henderson kind of shouts to Coady, Conor, and then he fumed on him, but Cody's kind of walking away as if to say, just leave me alone, as though he knew.
He did give a sly little low five, I think it was, to Dendoncker, sort of thinking we might have got one here, but I think he knew in the back of his mind that...
I think he kind of knew, what have I done here? I've put myself to the floor in front of the cop and I've got a dodgy penalty, and he just looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him up, and that's probably how he was feeling when it got taken off him, and it was just a night to forget, wasn't it, for someone who so many people speak really positively about it, so I don't want to let that stay in his character too much. It's just a bad night to the office for Conor Coady.
Yeah, I'm sure it will get wiped away from the memory quite clearly and quite quickly after the result the Reds did have. But Gorsty, I do want to ask you about Gini Wijnaldum. He put in an absolutely masterful display and, of course, got that second goal. Leaves us all questioning once again what's going on with the contract.
Well, you can speak to clubs, can't you, in just over 3 weeks. So I think you have to resign yourself to the fact that he's going to be on his way next season, and it's just going to be an absolutely crying shame because he's played pretty much. The only game he's missed was Lincoln in the League Cup in September, and so at a time when everyone's injured and fatigue and there's so much talk around all that, he's just carried on no problem. And it's a strange one with Wijnaldum because I actually asked Klopp on Friday at his press conference, given the amount that he's played, and you speak about the red zone, which is, anyone who's unsure of it, is kind of like the theoretical point that makes the coaches think players are close to an injury, so they might need the rest. So given he's played so much and he's probably in the red zone, where and when are you planning to give him a rest? And Klopp kind of dismissed it and just said, I don't want to talk about that now. And, Gini's playing fine and he's in the red zone, but so is everyone else. And then strangely, he kind of just said, it's nothing to do with his contract situation, which I wasn't really sure what he meant by that, if I'm entirely honest. And I just think if it's anything to do with Liverpool, if they get if it's in their court, then they've absolutely got to get him tied down for the next few years. And he's 30 now, so this is probably going to be his big last contract, isn't it? Wherever he goes or whether he signs a new one at Anfield, and he might be looking at it thinking he's one of the leaders in the squad, isn't he? There's a 4-man leadership group within the squad, which is Henderson, Milner, Van Dijk and Wijnaldum, and he might be thinking he's still on the same contract he signed in 2016, so he might be thinking, my payback reflect me seniority in the squad at a time when he's come in. Since he's come in, pretty much everyone else has been signed, and they're probably going to be on huge money, aren't they? So maybe that's part of the thinking. I'm not too sure, but I know he's been asked a couple of times about it, and he's kind of suggested or hinted that it's in Liverpool's cause. And if that is the case, then Liverpool, it's a no-brainer. They've got to get him tied down for another 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it is remarkable when you think about sort of the contract situation, Dan, that he hasn't sort of through any time signed a renewed contract, because I think yesterday he showed that quality as well as that sort of dedication and commitment and consistency that he has. You sort of, I think, forget maybe that he was on the Ballon d'Or shortlist, the 30-man long list last season, and that due to the quality that he's got, not just because he's there every week.
I think he's a phenomenal footballer. I think he's one of the absolute cornerstones of this Liverpool era of success. I think he's one of the most underrated players we've had in a long time. I've heard people compare him to Ronnie Whelan, which I think is a fair comparison. Another midfielder that pops up with vital goals, but also had this tremendous ability and versatility to be able to play in a number of roles across midfield, which is a manager's dream, isn't it? Particularly when you're going through a season like Liverpool have, where you're constantly trying to put square pegs in round holes. We were chatting with some of my mates in a WhatsApp group last night, and they were talking about, Wijnaldum, and surely he's got to sign him up, and as Michael Edwards got a little bit of magic up his sleeve and everything. And I kind of expressed the opinion, not that I've got anything really to back it up on. I just get the impression that maybe, obviously there was a lot of talk in the summer, wasn't there? And there was this feeling for a long time that we were only going to get Thiago if Wijnaldum left. And obviously Thiago came and Wijnaldum stayed. Obviously at that time as well, Ronald Koeman had just arrived at Barcelona. So that obviously ramped up the obvious link between Koeman signing his compatriot. Now, I think I'm right in saying they got beat again at Cadiz at the weekend, and they're having a really woeful season. And it doesn't take the biggest leap of imagination to imagine that Koeman won't be there in the summer. But my point is, I have the impression that basically once we got to the end of the window in was it September? It was September, was it? Because it was pushed back a bit. I got the impression that both parties were happy to say, let's just leave it till the summer and see how we're looking then, because obviously a season and a year of such uncertainty where no one really knew what was going to happen next. It's something I asked Aldo about as well, when we were chatting before for his column, and he made the point that really Gini holds all the cards now. His form and his consistency have kind of pushed Liverpool into a bit of a corner here. As Gorsty says, I think most fans, even the ones who were saying during the summer, sell him so we can get Thiago, maybe they didn't fully appreciate what Gini gives to the team, but I think his outstanding showings in the start of this season must have done by now. And I'd be very surprised if there were many or any Liverpool supporters that would not be quite keen and would be really pleased if all of a sudden we heard, whether between now and January or in January or any points before the summer, that he signed a new deal. But it wouldn't surprise me if it drags on until the summer. But if it does, I don't think that definitely necessarily means he's going. I think it might just means that both sides are keeping their options open.
I suppose that is the key thing, isn't it, Matt? That in January he can start talking to other clubs. Doesn't necessarily mean that he will immediately have something on the table that he signs. And Klopp has sort of underlined it a number of times that regardless what happens, you'd expect Gini Wijnaldum to keep putting in the kind of performances he has done already this season through to the end of his Liverpool career, whenever that may be.
Yeah, he's been obviously absolutely superb. We obviously know of the interest of Barcelona. I think I was reading something the other day that Barcelona are struggling so much financially, they might have to delay payments on wages and stuff like that from January because they just can't afford to pay their top stars all this money. So you wonder whether even from a financial perspective, that would have been a good idea or would be a good idea. Certainly you would think that can't be an option for them to be looking at him in terms of a pre-contract agreement if there is so much uncertainty on that. I'm not obviously an expert on Barcelona or anything like that, but it doesn't sound like they're in the best situation economically from what has happened this year. So it'd be interesting to see what options there are there. I've written a piece which I think is going out overnight, which essentially says that, you know, if Liverpool do lose him, there will be a plan behind that. I think obviously they look at long-term strategies and in terms of, you know, who is going to replace all of these players long-term. I think there's 10 or certainly 9 players who come next summer will have 2 years left on their contracts. Liverpool have then got to have a sort of real hard think about which ones of those do you extend the deals. I think Jordan Henderson, Fabinho, Mohamed Salah, Sadio Mane. There's a group of players who are at a similar age, and I suppose what Liverpool will be thinking is that they don't want to have a squad where they give all of those players new contracts. They age together. You get sort of an older squad, early 30s, and younger players coming through and nothing much in the middle. So I think if Gini Wijnaldum does leave, there will be method behind that. I do think Michael Edwards, you know, you've got to trust what he has done over the last few years. They will be aware of how good Wijnaldum is. It's obvious to all of us how good he is and how important he is, not just from, as you say, the number of minutes he's played, but the quality that he has. But if Wijnaldum is to leave, I think that will just really be a part of a longer term strategy rather than, you know, it being a real colossal miss. I think it'll just be the next step forward in terms of refreshing that squad. So, yeah, if it was up to me, obviously you give him a new deal. You give all of these players a new deal. But at some point, Liverpool will have to start to freshen things up. And I'm not saying necessarily I think that it's the right time to be thinking about doing that right now. I think you could leave it another couple of years. But Liverpool know far better than I do what they've got coming up, all the terms, all the deals, and what financially it would cost to tie Gini Wijnaldum down. You'd have to imagine he'd be looking at least a 3-year contract. Do you give him, you know, a huge increase in wages to take him up to the age of 33? I'm not too sure, given the fact that you've got Henderson, Thiago, Milner, who are all in that same age bracket. So I don't think it's as straightforward a decision as it looks, even though he's obviously hugely important. And if it was up to me, just from an emotional point of view, you would love to see him stay.
On that evolution point then, there, Gorst, it's an interesting one, but are we seeing sort of the completion and roundness of a midfield player in Curtis Jones that maybe he's coming a bit earlier than we thought? Last couple of performances in particular, of course, he's got a goal, but on Sunday, defensively as well and positionally in that midfield, he was really disciplined in the role he was asked to do.
Yeah, it's just one of the quiet success stories of the season, isn't it? Just kind of trundling on without too much attention, but to the point where when he's in the team now, you don't really think twice about it and think, oh, that's a bit of a risk putting Jones in. He's just kind of slowly, or quickly rather, becoming one of the established members of the squad, and it's great to see. I mean, we seen him last season with flashes of brilliance and flashes of the kind of stuff that made his name in the youth ranks. Thinking of the goal against Everton in particular, and the goals against Shrewsbury. He's obviously captain in the return leg, the youngest Liverpool captain ever, I think. And he scored against Aston Villa a little later on after the restart, didn't he? And just everything he did, you could see why there'd been like a role earmarked for him post Adam Lallana. But he's just come in and instead of just maybe turning 15, 20-minute cameos into half an hour cameos or the odd start in there, he's just become a bit of a first a name on the team sheet from the off. And I think a lot of that is down to the amount of injuries that Liverpool have had in midfield. I think if the likes of Keita and Thiago and Milner and Oxlade-Chamberlain hadn't been out as much as they have been, then Jones wouldn't have featured as much as he has. But I think that's been a little bit of a happy accident, and he's certainly made the most of the opportunities that have come from that. So fair play to him. He's having a really solid season, and in a way, it'll be more impressive than the kind of breakout season of last time when he burst onto the scene with obviously the goal against Everton.
Is this unfair, Dan, to say that maybe Curtis Jones is becoming and doing the role of the midfield that Liverpool fans and even maybe Jurgen Klopp hoped Naby Keita would have done when he arrived? Obviously, he struggled with injury himself, but Jones has been, whether it be in an attacking role, in sort of one of those three more functional roles, or even, as I say, defensively, he's done absolutely everything in that midfield.
I don't think it's entirely unfair, Guy, because I remember we said at the start of this season when Naby had quite a decent end to last season and a decent start to this season, and I remember commenting on the fact that it wasn't just all about flashy touches and shots on the edge of the box. He was doing some of the, for want of a better expression, the midfield dog's bodywork. The unflashy, unseen water carrying that that every midfield needs. And what's impressive about obviously, I would imagine Kate is 4 or 5 years older than Jones at least. Has got a fair degree more experience, certainly. Curtis seems to have kind of picked up the mantle from Keita in that regard, and the big advantage he's got going for him is that he's able to stay fit. You can have all the ability in the world, but if you're not able to get on the pitch often enough, particularly in a competitive squad, and particularly when obviously having had the kind of injury problems that Liverpool have had this season, then you're not putting yourself in the best position for your manager to be able to give your best to the team. Now, I'm sure there's nobody more disappointed at that situation than Naby Keita himself, and I certainly haven't given up hope on him as a Liverpool player. But I think it's fair to say Curtis, because of his consistency and his reliability in being able to get on the training pitch and be available for squads week after week, has probably risen above Keita in the pecking order now, because the manager knows he can rely on him. And until Naby can get fit and stay fit, it just feels like it's always going to be a bit stop-start with him. But, who knows, maybe this spell will be the one where Naby does stay fit, gets a couple of goals and good appearances under his belt, and kicks on into the new year. We really hope so, because there's definitely a player there. I think anyone that's seen him in action for Liverpool can see that very clearly. But he's got to be available more often. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, we might have a bit of a chat about him, or it might be a chance for him against Midtjylland in midweek. Before we get to talking about that, though, let's talk about the sort of lay of the land in the Premier League. All teams have now played at least 10 games. Of course, there were those involved in the latter stages of European competition last season, primarily Manchester United and Man City, who have now both played 10 games. But Matt, Liverpool sitting joint top of the Premier League table with Tottenham Hotspur, a side who put in a controlled performance themselves in the North London derby on Sunday. And they, along with Chelsea, who saw off Leeds, are looking like the two contenders to Liverpool's crown.
They are at this moment in time. I was very impressed with Chelsea against Leeds, and you've got to say that the Tottenham performance against Arsenal was pretty much, if you hadn't watched the game and you tried to describe it without watching it, that's pretty much what it would be, isn't it? Very much sit in, defend, do the typical Jose Mourinho things, and rely on Harry Kane and Heung-min Son to essentially win you the game with the counter-attacks and that sort of thing. So, yeah, two very impressive sides. I do think Liverpool are a step ahead in the fact that Liverpool have already suffered greatly with injuries. You would imagine that someone like Tottenham, if they were to lose one of Son or Kane, or potentially both of them at some point, you wonder whether they would be able to continue performing at the same level. Chelsea, it's slightly different. Obviously, they've got so many attacking options. You wonder what would happen if they lost the goalkeeper or one of the better centre-backs, or Ben Chilwell, for example, for a sustained period of time. You wonder whether that would affect them, but certainly in an offensive sense, they're doing okay. So, yeah, I think they are the two teams to watch. I think Manchester City will be there or thereabouts as well. So there are still a couple of teams to sort of bring into that equation. But I think, over the next few games, certainly with Tottenham, I think they play Crystal Palace at the weekend. They've then got Liverpool, one or two more tricky fixtures before Christmas as well. I think certainly by the middle of January latest, probably even earlier than that, to be honest, just looking at their fixture list and the number of matches, the injuries that they're likely to pick up, I think we will know for certain whether or not Tottenham are genuine contenders. But I do think Chelsea, just because of the attack and the depth that they have, the goals that they score, I think they'll certainly be closer to Liverpool than what they were last year. And you wouldn't be surprised if they were probably, for me, just ahead of Tottenham come the end of the season. But yeah, as I say, I think that the next few weeks will be crucial.
Yes, Spurs, Liverpool and Chelsea as well, Gorst, the only three sides in the Premier League who have each only lost one game so far this season. 11 games in, though. Is this too early for us to be talking about who's got what games and whose runs are tougher, or is it all part and parcel of a title race?
Yeah, I think now is a decent time to be kind of weighing it up. And I agree. I think Spurs are definitely contenders. They've got a manager who's been and done it before. I think Jose Mourinho won 3 Premier Leagues with Chelsea, that he never kind of tires of reminding people that what I've seen at Tottenham this season, they look very good on the counter-attack. Kane and Son are just an unbelievable pairing at the moment, aren't they? And Heung-min Son is just brilliant, isn't he? I mean, I was watching the North London derby, the first half yesterday, before I ventured up to Anfield, and he's just a Liverpool player, isn't he? In a Tottenham shirt, he works so hard. Play anywhere across that front three. He's very quick, 2 great feet, superb finisher. I think he'd be an absolute superstar in this Liverpool squad. Harry Kane, we all know about him. Scored again yesterday. The only thing for Tottenham is, did he have that strength and depth? As Matt says, if they were to get something of an injury crisis anywhere near the one that Liverpool have had to kind of navigate through, then that you would think would scupper them hugely. But Mourinho set them up defensively. I think they've got the best defence in the Premier League now, and they look so threatening on the counter attack. So they're definitely challengers, and Chelsea, in a completely different way, are challengers as well. I mean, we've spoken there about how Mourinho can kind of organise a team and get them well drilled. I think Frank Lampard has just subscribed to a bit of a theory of buying good players and sticking them in the team and seeing how they end up getting on, because that seems to be the way they're playing at the moment. But all 3 teams look like they're going to be really pushing for this title. And of course, you can't rule Manchester City out either. So it's going to be an interesting one over the next few weeks. And then post-Christmas, we'll see what kind of shape everyone's in. And we might have a little bit of a better understanding. But I still think Liverpool are the team to beat, especially when they're putting in the kinds of performances that they did last night.
Yeah, somehow the crisis club of the Premier League, Manchester United, are a point ahead of Manchester City at the moment. Of course, those two do meet in a Manchester derby at the weekend. But point on Chelsea, Dan, and I saw you nodding your head along with what the guys were saying on Tottenham. But on Chelsea, did Liverpool play them at the right time? They're the only team to have beaten Chelsea, and it does feel now as though all those stars that they did bring in are now beginning to gel together.
Yeah, it was the second weekend of the season? Third weekend? It was
yeah, Thiago signed, hadn't he? Thiago and Joseph just signed, and they went straight. Well, Thiago went straight into the squad on the Sunday, so I think it was the 20th September.
Yeah, because Thiago came off the bench, didn't he, at half time? Yeah, Chelsea are in better shape now than they were then. But if Liverpool were to play them tomorrow, I'd still fancy us to win, because I think we're a better team than them. But yeah, you can't take Chelsea for granted. This is one of the things I always say about Mourinho. Even if, you could, we'll see this season, but he seems like he's starting to rebuild his reputation a little bit with Tottenham. But his previous 2, sort of certainly, obviously didn't particularly work out for him at Manchester United, and things ended particularly sourly for him the second time at Chelsea. But what he instilled when he first went into Chelsea in 2004 was this culture of this winning culture, this winning mentality that has sustained long after his first exit there in 2007. The fact that they've been able to bring managers in like Ancelotti, like Conte, and just win a league within a year or two, even if that manager then goes within a year or two. I put a lot of that down to what Mourinho forged into that club during that first spell between 2004, 2007. Now, even if, there probably isn't a single player left from that era now. Obviously, Frank Lampard was there as a player himself, and even though he's early on in his managerial career, I think he's going to go on to become a decent manager. He's already put some decent players together. probably got a little bit of a free pass last year, didn't he, really? Because it was his first season. They had the transfer ban. There wasn't too much pressure on him. That being said, once a club like Chelsea gets to an FA Cup final against Arsenal, I think they would expect to win. No offence, Guy, and the fact that Chelsea did turn them over, that Chelsea did get turned over by Arsenal, means that maybe things were just pinpointed a little bit more on Lampard this season. So they've started well, but you do get the feeling that there'll be plenty of entertaining games surrounding Chelsea this year, and they've got some really exciting attacking players. Obviously, the lads they brought from Germany, Werner and Hayet, but Pulisic, the man who of course helped win the league for Liverpool back in June. He was back from injury and scored at the weekend, didn't he? And they've got some really, really good players. The French goalkeeper they brought in looks, a significant improvement on Kepa. But Thiago Silva's an excellent player, but he's knocking on a little bit now, and you kind of think when push comes to shove, Liverpool will get chances against the likes of him. But for me, Chelsea and Tottenham are the main two contenders. You can't rule City out, and I'm sure they will go on a run. But Chelsea will be in the mix. But as Gorsty said, and Matt, and I would only add my voice, that Liverpool are the team to beat. They proved it last season. They proved it again this season. Quite a few people have said, and I agree entirely, if it wasn't for the injury crisis, we'd be walking this league right now. The fact that we're joint top, joint second on goal difference, having had arguably the worst injury crisis since the days of Graham Souness and Phil Boersma, I think says a lot about the mentality and the ability of this squad. And if they can get more players back in the new year, I don't think we'll win it by 18 points like we did last year. But I have no reason whatsoever to assume that having been deprived of the chance to celebrate a Premier League title this year, hopefully we will get the chance to do so genuinely in 2021.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Let's have a quick chat then about Midtjylland before we go and do our team selector. Matt, this is going to be a chance for a number of the players on the fringes maybe to get a chance to shine, and those key players for a chance to actually get some rest for once.
Yeah, exactly that. That's the way that you've got to look at it. You've got to think that one or two key players will be afforded a rest. We've spoken about Gini Wijnaldum and Andy Robertson. I think those two are the two in particular that you would look to give the complete week off. I think they're the top two in terms of minutes played for Liverpool this season. They just basically never miss a game, do they? So you'd imagine, given this is an opportunity for that to happen, you've got to assume that will happen. One or two other players, I think, could still be there. The fact that Diogo Jota didn't start on Sunday might suggest to me that he will play midweek. There will be one or two bigger players there than probably is necessary, given that there's literally nothing riding on this game. But yeah, it's an opportunity to rotate, and it's an opportunity to give minutes to a couple of youngsters as well. I know we're going to come on to our teams. I think someone like a Jake Kane or a Leighton Clarkson, maybe in there with some other experienced players, couldn't be a bad option to go down. They've been on the bench a couple of times for the Champions League so far this season. It would be a nice reward, I think, for one or two of the young players to get a chance. So yeah, there'll be plenty of changes, but it'll probably be a slightly stronger Liverpool team than I've seen one or two fans speculate.
Jurgen Klopp said it, didn't he, Gorsty, when the Premier League title was won, that he didn't need to learn anything about players. He wouldn't be sort of throwing players in for chances to impress because he knows what they can do. Just wondered how much of that was sort of for the sound bites and how much he can actually learn in a game like this, maybe from a couple of those youngsters he might give a chance to.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you think ideally you'd look to rest and rotate as many as you could, but Liverpool aren't really in a position to be able to do that without massively weakening the overall quality of the team. It's not like they can put out a Carabao Cup team, say. It's more of a case of either the big guns are going to play, or you're going to end up with the team that could turn out to Kirby on a Saturday morning for an under-23 game or an under-18 game. So I'm not too sure how he juggles it. I think I agree with Matt in saying that it's not going to be as strange a team as some might think. So I think we've seen loads of jokes, haven't we, about bring your boots and the under 12s are going to be getting the game. But I don't think there'll be too many who'll be coming in for the debut. I think I think Rhys Williams is going to be playing. Nico Williams will keep his place. Kostas Tsimikas, and then who else? Kelleher. I think he'll probably stay in the team. Then I think generally, other than those, it's going to be something resembling a bit of a first team 11.
Yeah, let's get to our team then. Dan, I'll let you pick the goalkeeper and back four, and then if we want to pick it apart, we will. Otherwise, we'll move on. Who do you think is going to be between the sticks and the back four?
I'd be almost tempted to give Adrian a game just so his nose isn't completely put out of joint. But bearing in mind that it looks like Alisson is still going to be missing for maybe another week or so, and Kelleher may need to play at Craven Cottage and possibly even against Tottenham a week on Wednesday. I think maybe for rhythm and consistency, maybe you have to keep Kelleher in and goal. I'd agree by and large what the lads said. Nico Williams and Tsimikas at fullback. Rhys Williams nailed on. He's played virtually every Champions League game so far, hasn't he? In the group stages. And I know I was half thinking, until I heard what the lads said, who, to be fair, are probably both better informed than I and what Jurgen Klopp's likely to do. I was almost tempted to think, do you throw Sepp van den Berg in? Because obviously Liverpool, the only other option would be Fabinho or Matip. And both of those have injury problems. And if either of one of those was to pick up a knock, then that would be really rather distressing. I wouldn't, but I can see where the lads are coming from. I can't see him putting out a complete set of kids. So maybe it's a case of Rhys Williams plays the 90 and Matip and Fabinho have a half each.
Yeah, of course, he does have 5 substitutes in this game that he can use, Jurgen Klopp. Matt, unless you want to pick the back four apart, what are you saying about the midfield?
Yeah, I mean, just on the back four, I definitely have Fabinho in there. I don't think Sepp van den Berg is anywhere near ready at this moment in time. I think he will be a very good footballer, but I don't think he's quite ready. So, yeah, I'd be looking at certainly Fabinho at centre-back. Possibly you could do half and half with Matip, but I think there's probably enough time to the weekend, and it's Fulham. Obviously, Liverpool have got to turn up and treat it, as a big game. But I think Fabinho certainly can play in both of those. In midfield, I think Naby Keita has to play. He's obviously back fit now. It's an opportunity for him. I would be looking to give Jake Kane an opportunity in midfield. I'm not 100% sure whether Jurgen Klopp will go down that route, but I think if you put him in there, that's a reward for his progress. He's been training with the first team. He's been impressing whenever he's played for the under-23s. As I said before, he's played or certainly travelled and trained with Liverpool for these Champions League nights. So it would be a toss-up between him and Leighton Clarkson. I'd just go with him just on the form of this season, and put him in there, as I say, with Keita on one side and Jordan Henderson on the other, just to offer a little bit of experience. But again, give Gini Wijnaldum a rest and offer some youth players a little bit of a chance as well.
Yeah, we heard the impact that Henderson had away at Atalanta and that he has done throughout, certainly with the youngsters. So if Jake Kane were to play, that would sort of seem to make sense. Gorsty then, unless, again, you want to pull that midfield apart, I'll come to you for the forward line.
No, the only thing I'd say is kind of just playing devil's advocate to Matt. And if he's going with Jake Kane, then I'll go with Leighton Clarkson. And I think Keita is a shoe-in, isn't he? And Henderson, for that reason you say, Guy, in terms of he's very vocal and kind of coaching players through. So that'll be invaluable if someone like Kane or Clarkson plays. And then up front, Divock Origi, Takuni Minamino, and Jota maybe. Trying to think if there's anyone in the academy ranks who could step up and give the goal, but I don't think there is in those kind of areas. So that would be my front three for Wednesday night.
Dan, do you concur, or are you going to change the forward line?
No, I certainly agree. That was the three. I did jot a little team down here, but just before. That's the three I had up front. I was possibly thinking, ordinarily, you'd Curtis Jones would be one of the first names you'd be thinking of throwing into a game like this, but he's played an awful lot of football recently. And the two lads there made a fairly persuasive argument, the fact that the worth of having Henderson on the pitch. And of course, he is only just coming back from injury, isn't he? He only returned, a week or two ago. So he, getting another 55, 60 minutes under his belt probably wouldn't do him any harm. And obviously he can be the manager's voice on the pitch just to shepherd some of these young lads through before hopefully getting to put his feet up for the last half hour with Liverpool having a nice lead in the bag, we would like to think.
What's the score going to be then, Matt?
Oh, well, it completely depends on what team Liverpool put out, doesn't it? Let's be positive. Let's go for Diogo Jota to fire Liverpool to a 2-1 win.
Gorsty?
Yeah, it's difficult without knowing how strong they're going to go for this one. So I might sit on the fence and say a 1-1 draw.
And Dan?
4-2 Liverpool.
I was going to say 3-0 myself. Yeah, I think they'll get the job done. Even with that team we've selected, Diogo Jota, we've seen what he can do in Europe. Well, that's it from us here on the Blood Red podcast. Thanks for joining us. Of course, you can keep across Wednesday night's game across the Echo, the live match blog, and plenty of post-match reaction. We'll be back with the debrief here on the Blood Red channel, as well as Jurgen Klopp's post-match press conference. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, it's bye for now.
This is the Blood Red Podcast.